In a quiet, forgotten town, there stood an old, abandoned house at the end of a narrow, overgrown lane. The house had been empty for decades, and the townsfolk avoided it, whispering tales of the terrible events that had occurred within its walls. They said the house was alive, that it whispered to those who dared to enter, driving them mad. One cold autumn evening, a group of friends, Emma, Jake, and Sarah, decided to explore the house. They had heard the stories, of course, but they didn't believe them. They thought it would be fun to spend the night in a haunted house, armed with flashlights and a camera. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. At first, everything seemed normal, just an old, decaying house. But as the night deepened, strange things began to happen. Emma was the first to hear it, a faint whisper like someone calling her name. She froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Jake replied, glancing around nervously before she could answer. The whisper came again, louder this time. It wasn't just her name, it was a voice, murmuring something unintelligible, coming from the walls themselves. Sarah screamed as the whispers grew louder, echoing through the house. The friends tried to leave, but the front door slammed shut, locking itself. The windows wouldn't budge, and their flashlights began to flicker. The whispers turned into screams, filling the air with a cacophony of voices, men, women, and children, all crying out in agony. Jake grabbed a chair and tried to break a window, but the glass wouldn't shatter. It was as if the house itself was resisting them. The walls began to bleed, dark, viscous liquid oozing from the cracks and running down to the floor. Emma stumbled back, her flashlight dying completely. In the darkness, she felt something cold and wet brush against her arm. She screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening voices. Sarah, in a panic, ran upstairs, hoping to find another way out. But the stairs seemed to stretch endlessly, and the whispers followed her, growing louder and more desperate. When she reached the top, she found herself in a long, dark hallway. At the end of it stood a figure, a shadowy silhouette with hollow eyes, beckoning her closer. Jake and Emma, still downstairs, heard Sarah's scream cut off abruptly. They called her name, but there was no response. The house fell silent, the whispers fading into an eerie stillness. When the sun rose the next morning, the house was empty. The townsfolk found the front door wide open, but there was no sign of Emma, Jake, or Sarah. The only clue was the camera they had left behind. When the footage was reviewed, it showed nothing but static except for one brief moment, where a faint whisper could be heard saying, "Stay with us." The house still stands, silent and foreboding. But on quiet nights, some say they can hear the whispers, calling out to anyone who dares to come near.